All right, welcome to our first session for the AIA Colorado Committee on the Environment. This is our first educational session of the year, getting started with the AIA 2030 commitment. Again, we were approved for one AIA HSW credit, so if you would like to receive credit, please put your first and last name in the chat. We have a fantastic panel who is going to help us present information today. We'll go ahead and introduce them now. Our speakers for today are Paul Hutton, who's the Director of Regenerative Design with Cunningham and recently retired. We have Kevin Aronimus, Principal at SAR Plus Architects. Jericho Enriquez with Canon Design, he's a senior associate there, and Kylene Rockwell, senior building performance analyst at Interface Engineering. And you have Tiffany and myself. We are the co-chairs of the COTE committee, and we'll be leading you through the presentation today. So thank you all for joining us. I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Paul to get us started with the background on the 2030 challenge commitment.
All right. Thanks very much, Marisol. Pleasure to be here today with all of you. Are you seeing a screen that is the Metropolis magazine cover?
Looks great.
Okay, so you're seeing that. Excellent. So I've had the pleasure of being involved with the 2030 challenge almost from the beginning, not quite. But I was very fortunate in getting my good friend Ed Mesria to share with me a slide deck that he'd put together in the early years. So the first few slides are actually his slides. I wanted to acknowledge that these are his and that he was kind enough to let us have these. So I'm going to jump right in. So this movement started in 2003 with an article specifically written for Metropolis magazine. And that was the cover. I don't know if you remember that cover or reading this article. I do. And it was it kind of changed how we looked at so much of our profession. So it was a really significant moment in the beginning of this whole movement. And that article led to the creation of the 2030 challenge, which actually happened in 2005. The challenge itself was actually formally issued in 2006, and we'll get into that in just a moment. But I want to share with you a personal perspective. And that article and the origins of 2030 fundamentally changed how we thought about our profession of architecture and building and its impact on the environment. And prior to that time, if you had asked most experts, what is the impact of building on the environment or on climate change, the answer would have looked like this chart. You look at the buildings there, it's that little wedge right here on the left. Most people said, oh, buildings, yeah, you look at the gas that we burn in those, it's somewhere around 10% of the total environmental impact, total carbon emissions. And it was that article and the 2030 challenge in the movement that helped us understand, no, buildings have a much more significant impact on the planet than that, because that big orange chunk, electricity, more than 70% of that has only one purpose, to power our buildings. So if we look at end use, which is what 2030 did, rather than fuel source, all of a sudden we have a totally different picture. And that's what's driven the 2030 challenge so successfully. And by the way, that chart is how the state of Colorado still looks at emissions today. So the state of Colorado itself still underestimates the impact of buildings. All right, so that led directly to the formation of the 2030 challenge. Ed Mesria closed his office and said, this is what I'm going to do the rest of my career. And he loves animated slides, by the way. If you know anything about Ed, his slides always have lots of animation. So these are some of these animations that he has. So it's kind of fun to look at these from several years ago. So when this thing started in 2006, the immediate challenge was, hey, we have the technology today to reduce energy use in our buildings 50%. That's the target already. It's interesting, as a profession, we've just about gotten there today, 18 years later. But that was the idea, was that we could cut in half right away. And you all know the progression. that every 5 years, approximately, we would reduce by 10%. Interesting to think now, looking back at this. Next year, 2025, the target is 90%. We are so far away from meeting that as a profession. It's a little embarrassing, but on the other hand, we have made pretty good progress. And I think a lot of that is thanks to the 2030 movement. All right, so, fortunately, there was a lot of interest in the program right from the beginning. In the first year, 2006 and 7, these are the entities and organizations that signed on. A lot of cities, states, and of course, AIA and USGBC, many others you can see there, just some of them that immediately adopted this. And the United States government, especially at the GSA and the Department of Defense, also jumped onto it pretty quickly. And that actually happened not in the Obama administration, but in the second Bush administration. So that got going pretty early. And of course, then the formal commitment that AIA adopted was put in place in 2009 and has been running ever since. And that's what we're all talking about. So one of my early involvements was thanks to Kevin, who you're going to be hearing from in just a minute, came to my office and said, hey, we heard Seattle AIA chapter ran a whole series of training for architects around the 2030 challenge. Could we do something like that here in Denver? And Kevin asked if I'd be willing to moderate that. I said, sure, that sounds like a lot of fun. I had no idea how many thousands of hours I would have ended up spending the next 3 years, but I'm so glad I did.
Still hasn't forgiven me for that.
No, it's so good. And we ran that series in 2011, 12, and 13. All told, we had about 120 to 130 people that went through that program. And it was interesting. At that point, we targeted senior staff and decision makers. The thinking early on was that the younger staff are already wanting to do it. The roadblock tends to be at the senior level, and that's who we try to recruit for this. And here you see the 10 sessions. But that was a huge commitment, 40 hours each. It was a major undertaking for a firm or an individual to commit to doing that. And so we convened in Seattle. I think it was in 2015, we got together and said, okay, what can we do next after the in-person series? And we said, let's streamline this down to 10 hours of really compact, concise content and turn those into videos that anybody could stream at any time. And those, in fact, are still available on AIAU today. My favorite session is number 6. You'll have to look at it to see why. But anyway, those, I think, getting a little bit dated, but 90% of the content is still right on target for what we need to know today. So if someone needs an overview in your firm, these are still available. Highly recommend them. One question that came up early on was, hey, it's great to tackle the United States, but there are other countries, hint, hint, China, and as long as they keep doing what they're doing, it doesn't matter. So 2030 and Ed, we bundled off to China. And in 2015, we put in place the China Accord that had 59 large international design firms and large Chinese design firms also make a very similar commitment. So a lot of people don't realize 2030 is actually a major movement in China as well. And of course, that inevitably led to going to China and doing training for Chinese architects. I have incredible memories of being in Wuhan, of all places, in 2016, and doing training for many hundreds of Chinese architects. And of course, working with translators and everything. That was quite an experience, and so glad I got to be part of that too. And later on, we took that same training to Shanghai. So there's a quick overview of sort of the first 10 or so years of the 2030 movement. And with that, I'm going to stop sharing and turn it over to Kevin. Thanks.
Thanks, Paul. That's a great overview, as always. It is one of the things about doing 2030 commitment, of course, is the relationships you build along the way. And I've always appreciated the kind of community that surrounds this. For the reinvigorated COTE committee, super happy to see that going. Thank you, Marisol and Tiffany, for taking that on. A lifetime ago, I was in that role, and it led to all sorts of other AIA involvement. So careful what you get into. So what this means to your firm, I'm going to talk at a high level about 2030, and I think we turn it over a little bit to Jericho, and then I'll talk specifically about what we did at our firm. Is my screen sharing, by the way? You able to see my screen?
No, go ahead and
We're not seeing it now.
go ahead and
Okay,
share it.
thank you. Good now?
Yep.
Great, thanks so much. So what does it mean for your firm? This is going to be some of the logistics, and then I'll talk specifically about what our firm did. Some of the benefits that are listed here from 2030, I will say that we have not had a client come knocking on our door because we're signatories to the 2030 commitment. It's aspirational to think that somebody would, and some of that is reflective of like the client type that we have, which is largely developer driven. And that may or may not be a priority for them. I don't know that it's going to get you recognized for win you awards either, unless you're winning a COTE top 10, and then you're kind of in a different category. But there is recognition to it. I think when you sign on to this and you see the other firms that are doing this, it feels a little more important to you to understand that a lot of your peers are going through this at the same time. And that we've probably all heard before the standard of you can't improve what you haven't measured. So more than anything else, what this does is it makes you have to start measuring things and being honest with yourselves and reporting that. Some people get a little worried about that reporting aspect, or they get embarrassed about their EUI that they're tracking. It's important to say that that data is anonymized, so it's not to you. I mean, if you feel badly about it, then that's a good reason to do something about it. But it does, I like this last bullet point, that it catalyzes some other things to happen. And I'll talk about that when we get to, things specific to our firm. But that culture of innovation and leadership, if you are, a 3-year architect right now and you're trying to learn about this for the first time, you will need an ally in leadership somewhere in there. You have to find somebody in your firm that cares about this. And make it visible within your firm. It might be a dashboard. I think a lot of different offices have clever ways of doing this. Some people kind of frame it as a competition to see who can get the lowest. I really like this example from Payette on the right, which reminds me of something you would have seen in like environmental systems class, where somebody says thermal homicide by having a curtain wall directly to a concrete slab like that. So the steps for getting into 2030 are pretty easy. Creating the sustainability action plan, that SAP is probably going to be the biggest part of your commitment if you take that seriously. I think you could kind of phone it in. There's templates and all of that, but if you're interested in this, for our firm, it actually engendered a lot of really good discussion about what we're doing and how we want to do that. The work to do the measuring and the reporting is probably is much less than that. But then don't have it be a dead document. Like you want that thing around your desk and hanging out. Update it. We've already updated ours that we first issued in 2020 when we were just reevaluating some other things. And the details of that SAP, they can kind of have some key components and steps. And there's really good guidance to do this. The tools that are out there, I think, are even better than when we did this 4 years ago. So all of these materials are available to us. And these are kind of those key components. You got to get your company on board and have a commitment that you all agree on. You need to think about how you're designing and where this kind of added factor rolls into your process. You have to set those goals and kind of look back on them, reflect back on them. And of course, the reporting part of it is key, right? That's where we get this big DDX database from that everyone can look at. And what's so good about that is it allows you to say, geez, I've got this multifamily project and it's only got a 45 EUI. We want it to be better. How is somebody else doing this? And you'll find, I think we have found that it's a really collegial group. If you see a multifamily project by David Baker and Associates that has EUI of 20, I guarantee if you pick up the phone and call them, that somebody will talk to you about it. It's kind of a common bond that we share, and a kind of an interesting thing to tie us together as that goes. And then the outreach and advocacy part of it is actually us doing this kind of thing right now. Like we've been through that. Share with other people how you're going to do that. Make it part of your marketing. Make it part of your company meetings and what you talk to clients about. I think one of the things that we said is this is part of our design service. It's not an ad service you can VE out or drop out. Like we model at every phase and we evaluate this at every phase. So, and some clients are like, whatever, you got to do what you got to do. And other people are like, hey, that's really cool. I'm glad, or tell me more about that. I won't read through the questions, and I think the slide deck will be available, but this is a good set of questions to kind of get you started and make you think about, how this will affect your project delivery. It could be not at all, but I kind of hope not, right? If you do your early design modeling and you find out that you're, even a predictive, kind of thumbnail look at your modeling and something's way off, maybe you need to go back to the drawing board and look at orientation more fundamentally, or window wall ratio, what's your thermal envelope, and that should inform the design process. That's really the goal here, and make that part of it, make it part of kind of the common literacy in your firm when you talk about design, to have these components along the way, and then kind of have at the ready, like what are the things that you what are the strategies that you employ on every project, and know which ones get pushback, right? There's things we've all tried. I don't think I've used mineral wool for continuous insulation on a building yet. It always gets changed out for a lot of reasons. But also the setting goals, right? You can't improve what you haven't measured, so you have to measure this stuff and you have to set some goals. As Paul mentioned, we're way behind, right? We're supposed to be at 80% this year, 90% this year, 2025, I think. So the 5-year goals and the 10-year goals that were suggested by AIA here are good. We actually took those to shorter goals just so that we could feel like we were making progress, and said, like, we want 1 year and 5-year goals. And then sure, put out the big, hairy, audacious goal for, we're going to win a COTE top 10, or we're going to do a net zero building. And some of the pushback that you get, like you'll see these comments sometimes, it takes too much time and it's too many resources. You can call bullshit on this, right? It does take time. It should be part of your design process. Chances are you're doing this on your projects anyways, and it's just data that you need to extract. It might be that if you're working with an energy modeler, or doing early design analysis, or using like tag-along tools in Revit, it's kind of in there already. You have to pay attention a little bit. It doesn't take a ton of resources. We did use Cove tool early on when we were trying this out, which is an expensive program, really easy to learn. I think we kind of outgrew it when we did it. And yeah, you might have some dogs in the portfolio that don't look great from an energy use, and that's okay. It's looking at this holistically. It's kind of doing a very transparent and honest self-assessment. And to the 2030 targets, yeah, it would be great to get there, and finding the funding, the clients, the systems, whatever those components are. There's not many firms that are. I think later in the presentation, you'll see that a very small percentage of firms actually hit the targets. And there was a great article about 1.5 years ago now about how hard that is to do. A firm that shared that around. And no, the project doesn't have to be complete, right? In our reporting, we have things at every phase of design. And then we've actually just begun following up with post-occupancy. So I'll turn it over to Jericho for his specific examples, and then I'll take it back over in a little bit.
Great, thank you, Kevin. Can you all hear me?
Yeah.
Yep. Awesome. Yeah, so I saw this image and it resonated to me, just because when I started doing this, at least the AIA reporting, it must have been at least 8 or 9 years ago. I had no clue what I was getting into, and I volunteered actually. It's always been my interest to see, what is this? What is this kind of wave of reporting and all that? So I just want to also piggyback on what Kevin just said, is you really need to have your, the higher ups in your firm to buy, buy off on this idea, because otherwise it's hard for, especially if you're a smaller firm, to get started on it. And it's really kind of it's a lot difficult if you're interested in sustainability practice, but then someone in your firm does not believe in it. It's always difficult. So let me see. Okay. Let me just, sorry about that.
And I move things a little bit in
Okay, I'm going to talk about a little bit of how we do our process in terms of when we get a project and what we do with it. So I'm going to speak about like in the lens of being like a small firm who's never done this. So I'm going to just talk kind of basics so that it's a lot easier, at least when I started, a lot easier for me to comprehend. When we get a project, whether it's small or big scale project, we essentially identify, right, what kind of project that is, the staff, whether it's a major renovation, major interior. A lot of times when you say major interior, you're not changing you're only changing lights and walls and stuff. So you kind of know what your path is and how you staff your project. And then at Canon Design, we, over the years, we've established our own in-house kind of a metrics. So we created this, what we call Geo41 sheet and 402 sheets. And essentially, it's sort of a replicate of what you do when you input all your information to AIA DDX, 2030 DDX. I like using Zero Tool when you establish when it's a major renovation, new building, when you establish your baseline tool. Let me just see if I can just give me a second. It's a great tool to have, and as a matter of fact,
I think we may have lost Jericho for the moment. Let's see if we can get him back online. Maybe give him just a minute. I know Kevin shared his SAP in the chat as well, and was also going to go through SAR plus and their process with getting started with the 2030 challenge. So if we don't get Jericho back in a minute or so, we'll pass it over to Kevin in the meantime, and then we'll come back to Jericho.
Yeah, you bet. I'll give him just a minute here. Yeah. The leave button shouldn't be so close to the volume button, maybe.
Yeah. And for those of you who joined us a little after the start, we were able to get HSW credit for this session as well. So please submit your first and last name in the chat to get credit for the session. Kevin, why don't you go ahead and share, and we can pick up with Jericho when he's able to join us again.
Yeah, you bet. So I'll go back to two documents that we have to share, if that's up on now. Not the photo of our firm, just a nice looking group of people, but that's not what I meant to do. How's that? Are we looking at a DDX reporting recap?
Yep, looks great.
Great. So our process, I'll visit, depending on when Jericho comes back on, I can visit on our SAP. I posted our original one in the chat. And a little bit of how we got started. I don't know if this happened for any of you, but we had some time on our hands in the first part of 2020 when things went a little crazy before things got really crazy and busy again. And this was something that had been on my mind for a long time. As Paul mentioned, we've been involved in the 2030 series. I first went to a AIA national convention, I think in 2005. And met a bunch of really amazing people who were involved in the early days of COTE, and that kind of planted the seed for me way back when. Kira Gold and Lance Hosey and Roy McDonough and all these folks that were Bob Berkebile that were really influential in the early days of committing the environment. So we took the opportunity then to sign on to 2030 to do our SAP and run through that. And what I'm going to share today was just what somebody who unfortunately has recently departed our office, Amanda Spice, was our sustainability consultant. She's now with Group 14, darn you, Group 14. So she assembled this and presented it at the office at the start of the year. It's just a good overview of what this means for our firm. So we're about a 60-person firm here in Denver, a lot of urban infill mixed use projects with multifamily residential, office, hospitality, some planning and other work as well. So what this looked like for us, this was our 4th year of reporting. We've been in there. Again, we mentioned, we should have been at 90% right now. We are nowhere near that reduction. And that 90% baseline, I think Paul was off of like a 2002 CBEX or something like that. So that's the baseline that these reductions. So when we talk about a 90% reduction, that's off of a baseline from 20 years ago now. The firm sizes are all over the place. So if there's a sole practitioner on the call and saying like, nobody has ever done this, yes, they have. Some of the really big firms do it. We're kind of right there in the middle with another 70 firms or so. And there's a variety of things that you can report on, right? The EUI, of course, your energy use intensity is a given, like that's the main data point for us. But you can go into these other components of renewable energy, embodied carbon, lighting power density, and window wall ratio. We haven't begun in reporting on embodied carbon yet, but we are going to. That's part of another initiative that we could talk about if time allows, just with a group of architects in Colorado that are really looking at embodied carbon in buildings and measuring that. So what does that look like for us over the years? The most projects we've ever reported on last year, with 31 of them. The early years, I think we may not have done as many, or we didn't do as many that were in design phases perhaps, but we really do try to track everything that's kind of on the board at the time. And it's not there yet, right? We're supposed to be at 80 or 90. And it does make you feel better that it's getting better. So I will say that, again, back to the fact that so much of our work is developer driven. They may or may not hold this as their objectives. So you kind of have to go, I think Paul used to call it stealth mode, about getting in as good a strategies as you can. I think this was a slide from 2030 where we represented how we did relative to that in orange. So that most of the firms were at about 48% when they're supposed to be at 80 or 90 next year. We were only at 26.3%, doing better. So there's a lot of room for improvement. And the energy codes that we're working on help push that along. Certainly the code is always chasing a little bit more and more efficiency, but there's a long way to go and more for us to do. That number, that 4% of the whole building, meeting that 80%, that was only 4% of all the people that respond. None of ours met that target. And again, we're trailing a little behind some of our peers. And this, I think you have to realize when you look at all of this thing, it's every project type that's out there. So there might be some building types that are inherently more efficient, and some that are very much not so. So if you're working in labs or science and tech, a lot harder to achieve those goals. And where it lands by state kind of looks like, in some regards, a reverse of a political map, but it's surprising. There's some kind of outliers in there. Some places you think might be doing a little bit better. I'm curious to see what happens with Massachusetts in the next couple of years, because they've recently changed their building code basically to a passive house standard. And that's going to have to change a lot for them. Through Colorado, we're kind of in the middle of that. And then this is interesting because it talks about the difference in those project types. So much of our work is multifamily residential, and that's where we're trailing a little bit from that median. The one spike that makes office look so much better happens to be a LEED Platinum well-certified building here in Denver. So that one is going to score pretty well. It's got some really good energy strategies. And then, looking at it by a climate zone, some climate zones have it easier, some don't, right? You see all these great buildings in the Pacific Northwest that have so many great strategies. They have a little bit of help in their environment and their climate zone. And then this is interesting of looking through which buildings had actually included renewable energy. And so, a few of ours had that in there and some of them don't. And then I think there's another one that shows how many are reporting embodied carbon. So I think like this is sort of the next frontier of what we're going to see. We've all got a lot more educated and effective at working with operational carbon. And our next big chunk to take off is to look at the embodied carbon in our structures as we go. And, very few of those are reporting embodied carbon. But you'll see that it's on the uptick a little bit, right? So 2022, you saw a lot more firms that were reporting that. And even modeling it, I think, is coming, it's just becoming more common in the industry. It's sort of the next thing to look into. And I think that was a fairly recent add to 2030. It wasn't there in the beginning. So that's a welcome add to see like how that's going to do. How we've done it at SAR, like I said, we started with Cove tool, which is it's a steep learning curve, but it's a quick one. And it's actually a fairly intuitive program once you get into it. And there's a lot of different other stuff you can figure out, whether it's glare or daylighting analysis. But what we came around to is the work that we were doing a lot of times could be extracted by like what we were doing with Group 14 or another energy modeling company. Even sometimes just referring to our ComCheck, we could gather things out of there. So I'd kind of encourage you to like look at what you have in your office. Don't think you have to go out and buy a whole new set of tools. It might be on your desktop already. It might be in your, on your server as a tool you can use to get the base modeling done and extract that information that you need. And then again, there's so many good resources out there. We got a lot of good stuff from CoTool when we started with them, but the AIA 2030 page has just a wealth of information as well. I feel like every time we've had a question, we've gotten it answered very quickly. Particularly, CoTool is super responsive, and I think they even changed, some of their programming based on what we were requesting or what troubles we were running into. So I think you'll find it's a collaborative group that likes to help each other out. And I'm peeking back to the screen to see if we got Jericho back yet. Yeah,
yes.
We did. Good.
Sorry about that. Technology. I didn't anticipate that everybody is here in the office today and doing presentations, so it might have been our network. So I apologize, everyone. If I have just a few minutes to just finish off what I was about to share with the group. Is that good? Okay, cool. So I think I was cut off during the zero tool. So I'm going to share, and I'll finish it off with this here. You all see my screen? Okay, great. So zero tool is essentially, I was talking about, basically you go in here, and then if you want to get your baseline before you get all the engineers involved, you fill this out, and it's pretty easy to do. New construction, existing building, residential, commercial, and then I think this is the one that I was saying that this is sort of, you can adjust how aggressive you want to be in terms of percent reduction, and then of course, you want to check this since you're using zero tool, and then this energy type and annual energy purchased, you can select. So a lot of good information, but I want to finish it off with how we do at the end, what you see as a result, right? This is 2023. Essentially, when you start off, you get your free account, you open up your own account, and then we have all these offices. We have 17 offices, and every offices have a sustainability leader. I'm the Denver office sustainability lead. So I report all our projects here that qualifies for the project. I'm going to just basically go to the Denver office and I'll share what it automatically just changed what you've reported. So last year we had 8 projects, 81,000 GSF, and some interior, some whole building information, right? Paul, and I know Kevin, you mentioned this too. Where are we? You know, we're 2025. We're 5 years away, and as a matter of fact, somebody told me and reminded me that we're like 2,020 days away, right? So I mean, when you put it in perspective, it's like, oh my God, we're not going to make it. And honestly, within our firm, we believe that we're not going to make it. So we're pushing hard. We're telling all our PMs, BAs, hey, look, you know, we can meet all the basics, but let's be creative and let's do the right thing, not just as a profession, but do the right thing for the future generation, right? Because we're doing this not currently for us, but for our kids, for the environment. So I think I want to just finish off with this. Great information in here, but hopefully you can convince your partners or leaders in your firm that, hey, you want to get involved, because I think I want to finish off with this. Our design lead for the whole firm actually just said that doing sustainability thing is a good thing. So we approach this as a standard of care, just like when you do your practice your profession. And I think it's the right thing to do. So with that, thank you.
Thank you, Jericho. Glad to have you back. All right, we're going to transition to Kylene, who's going to talk about the DDX, which is up on the screen here, and just give a little overview as to what this is. It's the platform that we use to, the 2030 commitment uses to track the information. See, Kylene, I can share my screen, or if you want to share yours, you can as well.
Could you share?
Absolutely.
Thank you. Okay. Yes, I'll talk a little bit more about how you actually track your information for the 2030 commitment. When you do sign up and are a signatory on the firm, you will get access to the DDX. So that's the Design Data Exchange. And it's a tool that the AIA created that allows you to enter in your project information and to start to track how your firm is doing as every year with your portfolio. And it's also how the AIA is, aggregating all the data from all the other signatories and their projects. So the real impact of, why I think you should be in the DDX and why you should join the 2030 commitment is it's not just about showing your best and shiniest projects. Like, this is really meant to show how our building stock is across the nation as a whole. So, I mean, we do encourage people to be as transparent as possible with information. So you really want to track any projects that are in active design phases. And And then depending on the scope, but if any mechanical or envelope changes are being made, that's when you really want to, that's when you would kind of go the route of the EUI method and start to compare how you track against others and their energy use intensity. And then on the other side, for interior projects that are really just touching lighting design, then that's when you compare yourself to LPD or lighting power density. So it really helps you, I think, cater your project type and compare it to other building stock examples in the portfolio. And one of the great advantages is that everybody can use the DDX. So actually right now I'm not working for an architecture firm, I'm working on the engineering side. And you could technically invite your engineers to collaborate on projects. I don't want to give ourselves more work, but they can also help and edit and add in details into the DDX. But within your own design firm, you should definitely be, if you want to unburden yourself a little bit, you can start to add more team members, and as they learn the platform, they can start to, document their own projects, which is, I think, a really great flexibility of the DDX. So again, there's different ways, I think, based on the size of your firm, how you might be able to use the DDX a little bit more. Smaller firms, you can really do a direct input, so you can just enter project by project, and you really have a high degree of control with that. But then for larger firms with, hundreds of active design projects in a year, they can use their own in-house database that already has all the project information, area, project type, EUIs, and there's a bulk upload feature in the DDX that lets you just migrate all that information, which is very handy. And then I know they say energy modeling software can also kind of directly upload to the DDX. I've seen that be hit or miss depending on the software. But yes, some can do it, I think. But I wouldn't really rely on that all the time. It's my little tips. And then once you actually get your information into the DDX, it really does become a bit of a tool that you can use in your arsenal to hopefully improve your project's performance. So one of the first things that's when you enter your project, you get this screen. If you enter in your EUI, you'll see that, so this is an example for a Pawnee police station. And so how you start to read this project dashboard, on the left side is a how you compare bar chart. And so your project percent savings is the orange bar. And right now that's tracking at 49% savings. So, below the 80% target for right now. And the blue bar, that's going to be the firm average savings. So for this particular project, you're doing worse than your firm average. So that's, I think, also helpful to know. And then on the yellow bar on the left side of that box, that's actually the percentage savings across the entire DDX platform, across all your peers and the whole building stock, showing that for a similar project, the EUI savings is that yellow bar. So right now you're seeing your yellow and orange are pretty close to the same. The next box over, it's tracking a line chart. So it's, I think this is one of the newer features in the DDX, but you can really start to measure your progress towards a goal by entering in your EUI that you've modeled at SD, DD, and CD. And hopefully you see that your percentage savings as you're doing these iterative models is improving. So that's what it is demonstrating, is tracking at different design stages. And then the green box is really that high level summary, because I think a lot of project managers, they just want to know, how am I doing? How are my percent savings from the DDX baseline? And that green number there is at 49% savings. One of the other tools that are out there that the DDX platform gives you is a box plot. And I know Kevin was showing a lot of box plots, so let me just maybe try to explain a little bit of what the graph itself is doing. It is like a statistical graph. So I always refer to it as a box, like a box and whisker chart. So if you imagine the lines, those are the whiskers coming out of the box. On the left side, that line is going to be the minimum score, so your lowest data point. And then the box itself, that's going to be showing like your 25th to 75th percentile of results. And then the line in the middle of the box is the median value. And then on the right side, that whisker is going to be your highest value. So I think we go to the next slide, you'll kind of see it in a bit more context in terms of how the DDX starts to use the box and whisker chart. So they use it to calculate or show you how your EUI is compared, or your percentage savings is compared to other projects in the database. Yeah, so it's looking at the entire portfolio. And so like right now, just kind of cycling through an example, you can toggle the use type on the left. So you can, if you wanted to compare yourself to a lab, you could do that. The next click, you can look at climate zones. So I think this is more helpful. You can start to see, for your climate zone, maybe how are you faring in terms of how you compare to the other projects in the portfolio for percent savings. And this data is anonymous, so you don't know, like you're being compared to a LEED Platinum police station. So you don't necessarily know that. But with that red dot there, you're seeing that with this police station example, if we went to about a 49% EUI reduction, so that's to the right of the median, so you're doing better than median, you would be joining the third quartile, so 75th percentile of police stations. But I think what's really cool here, you can also start to see, like as you start to keep going, to see the right whisker that we're talking about. So the red line there has indicated an 80% savings, which is the current threshold target for the 2030 commitment. But you see there is that right outlier that, there was a project that was it 95% better than the DDX baseline in this use type and climate zone that you're looking at. So you do see it's potentially possible that your project could also, push the envelopes of design and get to that point as well. And then the last feature that I just wanted to talk about is there is a bulk export in the DDX, so you can take your portfolio across multiple years as well, so you can track progress. But then you can take that data and put it into Excel and really start to, I think, get a bit more dangerous with how you present that. So I used to work for a signatory firm, and they would take the bulk data export and bring that into Power BI, which is a pretty robust data analytics platform, and actually create a dashboard. But it started to cross-reference the firm's actual project information as well. So we could start to filter based on sector, office location, project budget, and just start to see, sports in Dallas had the highest EUI savings out of the firm, and really start to make a bit of a competition out of it. When you're in such a large type of firm, you can use that data to kind of, pit studios and offices against each other. It's just, I think, one of the cool features that you can take the DDX and go beyond its potential. Am I done?
Thank you, Kelly.
Okay.
Let's see, I think we might jump ahead into Jericho. I think you gave a little bit of the firm example in your presentation. So we'll go to some knowledge resources, and then we'll open it up to Q&A and let everyone have a chance to ask any questions about the 2030 commitment as well. There are so many resources that are available to firms and individuals who are considering joining. There's the Architect's Guide to Building Performance. We can post links to all of these when we share this as well. There's on the AIA website, ROI of High Performance Design is a tool that can help architects with the argument of why this is important, how this could help a bottom line as well. The Carbon Leadership Forum, Embodied Carbon Toolkit for Architects. Their 3-part very in-depth. It goes very high level to a little bit more detail, and then just their website has so much more information as well that's available if you wanted to jump into the embodied carbon tracking side of it as well. Architect's Primer on Renewable Energy. This is another AIA resource as well. And then, as Paul mentioned in the beginning, the AIAU courses that are available online for jumpstarting into the 2030 commitment. There is a whole team of staff available as well to answer your questions. They are very responsive. They're also great at reminding you when it comes time to report your data, which is at the end of March every year. All of that data is due. They are there to answer your questions, help you through the process, and also with remind everyone with those deadlines. There's their email address as well. And then they have some open office hours that they record of people just asking questions that are very informative as well. So now I'll just open it up to everyone who's joined for some Q&A of our presenters. I'll go ahead and stop share.
Well, someone must have a question, Marisol.
I know, we were saying this is normally such an inquisitive bunch.
Yeah.
Us architects.
I'll throw one out. But one of the things that always causes confusion is the now relatively silly standards for lighting power density, LPD. So I've been trying to get those changed for years. It's just kind of, you know, those were put in place not by 2030, but by AIA. And they were put in place before LED lights really were commonplace. So if you're not beating the LPD criteria, then you do have a serious problem.
Yeah. Yeah, I just want to add to that while we're waiting for hopefully someone would just ask some questions. With that, I'm actually finding out too that when I say challenging our engineers, you know, we tend to just lay out our lighting, you know, with all the lighting levels and all that kind of stuff. It's easy to do it now with LEDs, right? But the challenge that I think we have is when we have our in-house engineer as well, but if it makes sense to hire a partnership with a local one, if we're not on the same page, our challenge is really just challenging them basically and say, because they're used to laying out certain lighting and accomplishing certain lighting levels, and then how do you challenge them, right? Because it's usually not in their contract too. So it's always a battle, but I think as an architect, it's our duty, I guess, to make sure that we beat the baseline that's required by code.
Looks like we had a couple of comments in the chat. Kevin, can you, looks like there's a slide early in your presentation on the size of firms participating.
Yeah.
Can you pull that up again?
Sure. So I think there was another chat in there too from somebody, small practitioner, maps in the chat about the amount of.
You know, Kevin, while you've got this slide on, this might be a great time to mention that the large firm roundtable last year put in place that firms have to report or they will no longer be eligible to be part of the large firm roundtable.
Yeah, that's great. Are they requiring embodied carbon as well, Paul?
Not yet, but they are strongly encouraging reporting embodied carbon, and you know they had a criteria of 20% of your projects to be reported. That was the target for this year.
And maybe to answer Bruce's question about, you know, a small firm and not having a champion necessarily, I guess I would say mine the data that you might have already. If you're working with an energy consultant, you might ask them if they have that available. You might be able to review permit sets on which you've done ComCheck. And, you know, even if it's in the first year, you report on 3 projects and the next year you report on 6. I think it does kind of gain momentum once you get it going, and there's some startup to it, right? Maybe for a small firm's effort, you don't put so much effort and thought and graphics and all of that into the SAP. But I think, you know, getting to the data is really the heart of the matter. What we found instrumental about doing the SAP was it brought the small group of us that were interested in this to develop a document that could be shared by the whole firm. You know, so we'll have that document, and it's all digital now, but us old guys still sometimes have paper. You know, we'll have our strategic plan and our sustainability action plan, and now like our just label information. Having those components, I think it helps, especially in the onboarding process, to have somebody understand like who you are and what you do and why you do it.
Kevin, I remember that was so impressive. I think one of the first times we came to your firm, you had the SAP printed there, handed it out, and we were able to take it with us and look through it. And that was when we were trying to develop ours as well. And just being able to have that as a resource was just so helpful. So I think we're all wanting to be here as a resource. I mean, Roland and Broughton, we're now just under 50 employees, but when we were looking at joining the 2030 commitment, we hired a sustainability consultant before it stepped into my role, who helped us just formalize what our goals were. How do we distill it into you know, buckets that we can understand, digest, and speak about with clients and with our project team? And how do we take these big ideas and turn it into something that is digestible? And that really helped us get started.
I see Ryan at Ventures had a question about studies into different strategies used by more successful and less successful projects. That makes me think right away of a study that was published by COTE just a few years ago. I think it was called The Habits of Successful Firms or something like that. I know it's still available, but COTE surveyed their first 20 years of top 10 award winners and did a really in-depth dive into what about the firms that won a consistent awards at that level. What were they doing in terms of firm culture and design strategies to drive that success? So Ryan, I'd point you to that, first of all, is a really helpful document. Although it probably is due for an update. I think it has been a couple years or more since that came out.
Yeah, I think it, along with that too, Paul, in response to Ryan's question, you know, different building types, right, is energy hog hospital versus, we do a lot of hospitals, you know, versus like a retail store, for instance. Denver is doing the right thing with their energy code, and it was my first project that we just got the energy code signed off with also the Denver Green Code. And I think we're doing here in Colorado, we're doing the right thing, right? Setting that as a, you know, coming from the jurisdiction especially, and I've been asking some of them in that group, hey, change your specification. If we're doing city projects, your front end spec needs to also align with your mission, because otherwise, you know, you have 10 bidders out there that are just all over the place. And so I think it's in the work, but I think we're moving in the right direction.
Perfect. Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Kevin, for putting in your email there. Happy to answer questions. I know we're right at time here. Huge thank you to all of our presenters today and participants, and it was great to have you all join us. We are having a follow-up session to this one where we will talk about some case studies and we'll get into the detail and nitty-gritty of implementation of the 2030 commitment. So keep an eye out for that. It'll be coming out in the next couple months. Well, thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you all.